Hi, and good evening to Women's Voices Radio. Tonight, we bring you a debate on the topic glass ceiling, an invisible restrictive barrier for women in the workplace, and find out what are the barriers and if it really exists. Also, starting from today, first Thursday of every month, we bring you two news segments, Women's Health and Women in Sports. All that on Women's Voices Radio with your host, Nivedita Suravaram. But first, the NPR News on WAER Syracuse, Jazz 88.
Women's voices making a way, determined to hear her story. Women's voices taking a stand, dynamic and strong, comfort and sweet harmony. Women's voices every day.
Voz de la mujer. Ocho la donna.
Gender.
Peace.
Justice.
Equality.
Women's voices making a way, determined to hear her story. Women's voices taking a stand, dynamic and strong, comfort and sweet harmony. Women's voices.
From WAER Syracuse, Jazz 88, I'm Nivi Suravaram and this is Women's Voices Radio. Glass ceiling. What is glass ceiling? The dictionary defines an unacknowledged discriminatory barrier that prevents women and minorities from rising to positions of power or responsibility as within a corporation. In 1991, the U.S. Department of Labor defined glass ceiling as those artificial barriers based on attitudinal or organizational bias that prevent qualified individuals from advancing upward in their organization into management-level positions. Let's talk to Dr. Brenda J. Wrigley, who is an associate professor of public relations at Newhouse, SU. Her PhD dissertation is entitled The Ceilings Made of Structural Steel, Not Glass. Hi, Ms. Wrigley.
Hi.
Could you tell us more about glass ceiling?
Sure. The glass ceiling is something that's been discussed since before 1991 with the glass ceiling report, but it's something that a lot of people today don't believe exists anymore. I find that very interesting given the statistics that indicate that women are about half the workforce, yet they make up about 3 to 5% of top management positions.
Yeah,
So
I
there's
came
a
across,
disconnect.
I read that it's almost 49% of women work in US alone. So why is it still existing, or what's the whole reason about it?
Well, my research has shown that there are probably a number of factors, and so structural factors are the main factor, in my view. It's not anything that men are doing particularly to discriminate. It's not any overt policies. It's more the gender role socialization and the structure of organizations and their ways of mentoring or not mentoring, their ways of having sort of unwritten rules in place that women are going to have to meet a higher standard than men generally would.
So do you think it's a long followed work culture? I mean, do you mean by that? Is it like an accepted form or norm by people?
Yes, because gender role stereotyping is behind all this. So everybody buys into it, and women buy into it too, which we never talk too much about. We want to talk about men doing that, and we want to make men the sole reason, but women are just as guilty of doing that.
So you mean to say how do the women react and when they know that they're almost there but they just can't reach that next step? So how do they usually react? Because you've done your thesis and you had discussed with many people. So how was your reaction and interaction with those women?
Well, they get discouraged very easily, and many of them deny that there is a glass ceiling so that they can deal with the cognitive dissonance, the feeling that there's something not quite right there, but I don't know how to solve it, and I'm only one person, and I bet I personally can't do anything about it, so I'm just going to suck it up and do what I have to do to fit in here. I don't want to make any waves, because women who are assertive in the workplace are branded as troublemakers, and that's not a good thing. That sort of gives you a blackball approach to going any further in that workplace. So a lot of women will either put up with it or they'll move to another organization, make a lateral move, which doesn't really get you any further, but it gets you out of a bad situation.
So is it just in the corporate sector, or is it existing in all kind of professions?
Well, I don't think the corporate world is solely the bastion of this problem. If you watched the State of the Union address the other evening and you looked at the audience in the Senate and the House, you didn't see very many female faces among the legislators.
True.
The females were the guests or the spouses or the people who were singled out for a portion of the speech. So they're very disproportionately represented in the legislative branches. Most of the government positions that women hold are so-called pink-collar jobs. Very few women in upper levels of government management. So it's everywhere.
So that's what, I mean, that's your idea of glass ceiling, which is existing all over.
Yes.
Okay. Today we also have a truly international panel here. Let's talk to Cristina Grigorge, who is from Romania, Daria Damor from United States. Both are management students at Whitman School, SU, and Chinulos Selvia Onwalu from Nigeria, and you are studying MNO from the Newhouse School, SU. So to start off with Chinilo, what are your views on this issue now that you just heard our conversation with Ms. Wrigley?
I have to say that it is definitely a problem all over the world. Dr. Wrigley was talking about gender stereotyping, and I have to say that similar things happen in Nigeria. We just recently in Liberia, there was Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who was just recently elected as the first female head of the state in the entire continent, and it's considered a rather momentous event. However, it's more of a, in some senses, it's more of a anomaly than the norm, because similar gender stereotypes exist in Nigeria. I think women are hobbled, especially by the expectation of marriage. If you're not married, then you're not considered a full person in one sense. And so rising through the ranks is often very much contingent on your spouse or another male relative. The expectation is that, and women embrace this as well, the expectation is that you're going to get married and you're going to be a wife and you're going to be a mother, and anything else beyond that is sort of extra. If it's generally frowned upon, but certain powerful women in the higher classes can get away with it. But usually they're older women who have quote unquote raised their children already, so they no longer have those responsibilities. However, if you're perceived to be neglecting your family or neglecting your children's welfare, then that is considered a very negative thing, and that in itself, I think, constitutes a glass ceiling in all levels of the workplace.
That's almost like having rules in the society that these are the do's and the don'ts of that you have to follow.
Definitely. One thing that's very important to note is that different traditional cultures have different roles for women as well. In my culture, where the Igbo, we have what we call separate spheres, gendered spheres. So women are allowed to work outside the home and things like that, but they're expected to do it in a sphere separate from that of the men's, which would involve a more domestic things. There was a history. We're an agricultural community, so we have a history of male farms and female farms. And female farms were used primarily to feed the family, while male farms were used to trade and get further income. So we have that tradition. It's different in different
Cultures.
yeah,
Yeah.
across the continent.
Oh, that's really a very informative piece, which I'm sure none of us knew, and even it's a good treat for our listeners too. How is it in Romania, Christina? How is the cultural? Is there any expectations from women, as in these are your do's and don'ts in the society?
Well, I just first wanted to relate to what Chinelo said for Africa. Europe too is very different depending on the tradition and culture. We have basically two main cultures. The Latin culture, which is more like South, and then the Western and North culture, which is like Germanic, Anglo-Saxon. And as we have seen, usually we have at least like UK and Germany, we have women in politics. So it actually started there. To the breaking of the glass ceiling, it started to break in the north, and then it started gradually coming to the south. Cultures are different, but Europe is going through a transition period. You know all about European Union and the new countries that are going to join European Union, and actually this has an impact over Romania. Romania too was a Latin country. Usually Latin countries, women are usually not treated equally as men, and they are viewed only, the classical icon, not really working women. However, joining EU, things are starting to change, and more and more women are going to the corporate world. From my experience, however, this is a gradual change and it's going to take some time. Yes, women do get in the corporate world, but it's very hard to get to high positions, and it's very hard for them to be treated seriously. That's one of the problems we experience. Women, especially in Latin countries, are not really taken seriously when regards to business. That's very hard for upper management, women in upper management to become, and we have to kind of give a little in order to kind of give a little from the feminine side, become more masculine, not being so sensitive and emotional, dress more like a man in order to be able to be treated and so that they actually look at and listen to you and not just look at you like an object and as a woman.
Just to reach that position and just to satisfy your
exactly. An example would be I used to work in a bank for 2 years. There are plenty of women working in banks in Romania, for example. However, they're all low level. Upper level, it's like over 80% made of men, upper level management. Even I think 90%. Things are going to change, but it takes time and it's gradually. Yes.
And Daria, you're from United States, and States has it has all cultures from all over the world. It's mixture of all cultures. So you would have come across many people, I mean your friends, and you would have come across over conversations, or you would have read it in paper. So what are your opinions on this?
Just to touch upon what Christina's already said about women not being treated seriously, I think that's vastly different in the United States than in Europe. In just the past 10 years, there's been a great improvement. Just last year, published by the Center for Women's Business Studies, 10,600 businesses in the United States are owned by women, of which $2.5 trillion in revenue are generated. Women are opening twice as many small businesses than men at the current rate. More and more women want to be in more control of their lives, and therefore don't enter or remove themselves from corporate America, not so much because of the glass ceiling preventing them from moving up. Rather, they value family time more than men do, and they value extracurricular activities. So because corporate America demands 24-hour being on call because of client crisis, relocation of jobs, it's not as much an easy of a choice for a woman to make as for a man who is also expected to be higher up in the chain on the corporate ladder and expected to work 80 and 90-hour weeks. Women aren't expected to do this. They're more expected to be at home with the family. Therefore, it's easier to make the choice not to move up in corporate world.
What do you have to say, Ms. Wrigley?
Well, she's right about the growth of women's businesses, and women are more apt to start new businesses than men are in the U.S.
Yeah.
But I find it interesting that they feel the need to do that because the structure is not providing them with childcare, with flexible work schedules to the extent that they feel they can be equal players in a corporate environment. Now, the corporation isn't for everybody. Not everybody wants to be the CEO of a corporation. But the opportunity should be there, whether you're male or female, to do that if that is your choice. And there just aren't things in place in our structure of work in this country to make it equally easy for women to do that. There have been some studies of women who got Harvard MBAs and who then went into the workforce. Those who stayed delayed childbearing to the point where many of them then couldn't have children.
Can't have
It was
child.
very difficult for them. Many of them dropped out because they wanted to have families or they just didn't
Get
want
back to family and so that.
Right. So women have to make that choice and men don't.
You're listening to Women's Voices Radio on WAER, Syracuse Jazz 88, and we are discussing about glass ceiling. Coming back to what Christina said, women are not usually taken seriously. So you had a lot of interaction with women. So is it just because they're more emotional or they can't take too many things and move up or work it out? Is that the reason that women are not really taken seriously at workplaces?
Well, I think we in our culture do not view women as problem solvers. And I find that very humorous because I think women in their daily lives solve a lot more kinds of problems probably than men do.
Yeah.
But we have this public and private sphere thing, and so women are perfectly allowed, it's perfectly fine for them to dominate the private sphere, that is the home, and not only are they allowed, it's expected that they will. The public sphere, even with all the changes and everything that's gone on in the last 50 years or so, is still considered the male sphere. So women can come in, but it's still thought of as a male enclave.
Man's world?
Right. It's still a man's world. And the other thing, too, is you can go outside and work. We'll give you that permission. But, oh, by the way, you also have to do everything at home. The notion that men have taken over a greater percentage of work at home is a myth. That's simply, the research shows that hasn't happened. So women have to do it all if they want to work outside the home. And that hasn't really changed at all. And to me, that's very discouraging.
Chinilo, do you want to add anything to it?
I certainly do. I think that I have to agree with the idea of public and private spheres in Nigerian culture as well. The sense that a woman it's okay for a woman to dominate her household and dominate completely. However, to do so outside of the home would be considered an imposition by men, and is often women who try to do that are often vilified. Very recently, we have we just elected we have a Minister of Finance, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, who is female. She's Harvard trained, and she's perfectly capable to do the job. However, she has found herself coming up against a lot of difficulty in her job, mostly by men from certain cultures where it's not considered okay for women to give orders, who really just don't want to have to take orders from a woman. I think that for one thing, that is a very, very big obstacle for women in the workplace. I think in any culture, but especially in Africa.
Before we go further with the discussion, let's hear to Tracy Lumpkin, who has successfully reached the managerial position in the corporate world. Tracy has experience both in public and private sectors. Let's listen to her right after a short break.
Good morning, sir. I's Fannie Lou Hamer, and I's here to vote.
Gal, didn't you look in the mirror this morning? Colors keen to vote? Fanny didn't take no for an answer. Hear her story on the next Women's Voices radio drama, Thursday, February 9th, 2006.
She rocked the state of Mississippi.
I welcome you on Women's Voices Radio, Miss Tracy. Thank you so much for taking time out from your busy schedule and to share your views and opinions about the topic glass ceiling. The first question that I was really wondering and I wanted to ask you was that you were with the government sector and now you're with the private sector. Do you see any kind of glass ceiling existing, or have you come across any of the glass ceiling?
I agree that the glass ceiling does exist. Not that I've experienced it, but I've seen it experienced by other people. But I think a lot of that, the way people are perceived by others, just as you choose a person or to hire them in a position, there's certain qualities that are not just qualifications that you're looking for. I think there's some hesitation in hiring females by a lot of stigmas and things like that are involved.
On the face of it, people think that women are very soft-spoken, they can't handle emotions, and is that a main reason?
I think that I've heard that to be a part of it. If you hear comments in reference to that on both sides, government and private sector, I've seen it. I've even experienced it myself, being in management on both sides, that the women do have a tendency to be more emotional, and more personable. And I think that's by the character of our nature of our character, rather, of who we are. All women, that's not saying that all women are that way. Some women just do display that, and it shouldn't be, but they do.
Coming back to the corporate sector, you said there are a large number of women in the boardrooms, but how about voicing their opinions? Are they given a lot of freedom too? Do you think so?
I think they are. I think they value their opinion. I think we have to be a little bit more careful about what we say when we say it because of perceptions, and to make sure that we quantify and qualify everything that we say.
So each and every word will be taken into consideration, and when they put in their words, they have to think twice and let it out. That's what you want to say?
Right. And I think in saying that many times a man can speak, and no matter what's said or how it's said, it's received. I think there's a critical element when it comes to the female speakers as to prejudging before they even speak. So you really have to be careful when you do speak.
And one of the recent studies shows that most of the decisions are taken while, golfing, men social parties and things like that. Women really can't enter. So what do you have to say about that?
See, I experienced just the opposite. Maybe it's just been a blessing for me, but I've went to those functions. I've been invited to those functions, like when companies invite corporate people to participate in their corporate affairs. The offering has been extended to me as well. So I've actually attended, a couple of the golfing events and after-hour events and things like that.
So how was your experience over there? I mean, do some of the decisions or some of the talks happen there and then it comes to the boardrooms back?
Not necessarily. I think everybody in that situation, they really try to leave work alone. I think people frown more nowadays when you want to bring up work at social affairs, because we're supposed to be there to relax, unless it's considered a business dinner and we're there for business purposes. That's different.
So was it like an obligation that you had to go and just participate because you were invited, or do you also participate in golfing? And
it was by choice.
Okay.
It was by choice. It was no force there because some people didn't go. They don't golf, or they didn't feel, or they had other things planned and they just didn't go. And I don't attend all of them. I just attend the ones I have time for.
Okay. What do you have to say about the glass ceiling, which has these unwritten rules and which really exists in this work environment? And do you think it'll take some time for the women to reach? Because it's just handful of women, like say eBay or Avon. Those are the kind of companies where women CEOs exist. And do you think it'll take several more years or lifetime to reach that top position called a CEO of the company?
I see it as a paradigm shift, as a change in thinking for many people, you really have to reach out to your entire team, not by gender, but you have to search to find the valuable assets within an organization. And sometimes they are at the lowest level. It's not rather than male or female, but what do they bring to the table? What do they offer? And it needs to be diversified so that you can have the best qualifications in the organization. I think a lot of times it's the paradigm shift, what we call the old salty dogs that want to keep things the way that they are in the status quo. And then you have a lot of industries today that are changing.
Mm-hmm.
They just are, because of the sexual harassment laws and discrimination laws and all these things. Companies are very much monitoring their equal opportunity. In corporate America today, there's a lot of rules, there's a lot of laws that have been implemented that kind of protects people from being harassed and protects people from discrimination, be it gender, race, whatever it may be.
Coming back to
I think a lot of it's broken down. I still think that there's some, they are true enough, but maybe they'll all retire, right?
Yeah. But coming back to the discrimination part, why are women still paid substantially less than men are, though they share the same position in the company?
That can be many reasons. There's so many variables in that. When you say that they're being paid less, you have to look at their qualifications, their skills and experience. That's one side of it. But if they match with qualifications, skills, and experience, legally they can't hold back, the salary range from them. And, you have to negotiate your own salary also. When you come into an organization, it's up to you to know what you want to be paid. And then when people get in, they realize that they were underpaid because they didn't quote it. They didn't request what they should have.
So you think that's where the problem lies?
Yeah, because the way it is and what I've seen in the organization is there's a job out there, and it's posted, and there's scales that they can hire that job for. There's a range. And on most applications, even in our organization, it doesn't even tell you whether they're male or female. So you're really looking at the root of everything. It's really their qualifications, whether you throw the resume out or keep it. And what ceiling you get to. And it doesn't matter, you ask, the way we do it, the way I've always done it is, and the way I've seen other people do it is, what are you asking for a salary if we wanted you for this position? And it's up to the person to know what that salary is.
So you
now,
mean
if they undersell themselves, that's their fault.
So you mean to say that they have to step down and maybe demand and, really question the authority and make way for themselves?
It's nowhere near that. I've worked for all the corporations I've worked for, they've always asked me what would they have to offer me to accept the position. They pretty much left it in your ballpark.
Yeah. One last question. You've been working for a long time and you've seen both sectors. So any opinions and any last conclusion that you've...
Yeah, I think that in my experience, it's not so much a glass ceiling as it is maybe an unequal playing field in the sense that some people have to work harder. I still see that where... and it's not necessarily with the company, but I still see it in corporate America. I hear people experiencing it in other organizations that they have to work harder, depending on their race, depending on their gender. It really is harder for a female, I think, to make it to the top. And they have to do twice the work, I think, that a male has to do. That's my opinion.
Thank you so much, Ms. Tracy, for taking time out on Women's Voices Radio WAER Jazz 88.
Thank you.
Dr. Wrigley, what do you feel about the opinions of Ms. Tracy?
Well, I agree with much of what she said, but I think we want to be careful here to not blame women for these problems or not blame minorities for these problems. We need to look at the structural things that are in place. We say, well, women should be negotiating their salary. Well, yes, they should, but women aren't socialized to do that. So we don't question the structure and why it doesn't offer people fair and equal compensation to begin with. We just say, well, the ball's back in your court. It's up to you to
Decide
what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
We don't ask men to do that.
Yeah.
But we socialize men to negotiate their salaries. The majority of men negotiate their salaries and never accept what they're initially offered. Majority of women do not.
But don't you think some women have broken the glass ceiling and reached the top position? Like, I read a group of women who are the CEOs of companies like Xerox and eBay, but it's just few handful of women. So why is it so? And even if they want to reach to the top position, do you think if they start their own company only, then they're in the top position? They didn't go from the bottom position to the top position.
They have a better chance of success and control if they have their own company. But what bothers me is that we see these examples of singularly successful women, and people see that and assume, oh, things are going well. Women are doing well. There are a lot of women in management and top management. There are not. So holding up a couple of examples gives people the wrong impression. Mm-hmm. And I think it's going to take several lifetimes if it ever happens. I don't think it's just throwing the old male managers out. There have to be big structural changes. There have to be changes in how we do gender role socialization in this culture before any of this is ever going to be any different. Mm-hmm. I hate to be so pessimistic, but I am.
Yeah. Christina, Daria, and Chinelo, you still have long careers ahead of you, and how do you plan to deal with this issue in case you ever encounter with it? Daria, what do you have to say?
I had already planned my career around a family, around what Dr. Wrigley has already pointed out as the gender stereotyping. And I expect that I'm not going to climb to the top of the corporate ladder because I want to take the time out in order to have a family. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the big reasons why women also don't reach to the top of the corporate ladder is because they take 3 years out where their male counterparts do not. Dr. Wrigley also touched upon childcare flexibility and work flexible schedules where that wasn't offered to the male counterparts 20 and 30 years ago. So women have the expectation of doing more than just their career. And I think being a student in a graduate program ready to set out on a career, you have to have that expectation that you are making a conscious choice between family and work.
Mm-hmm. Christina?
Well, it's close to what Daria said. I still don't know. I'm really hoping that I could build a career, though I know it's not really possible to have them both. So somewhere in the line, you have to make a trade-off. I don't know yet if I'm able to, if I'm going to do the trade-off or when the trade-off is going to come. I really hope I can do both of them, but I know the examples are only maybe a handful, that they actually did both, and I don't really know.
Chinelo?
Well, I think being in graduate school and having to plan a career, these are things that definitely I have thought about. However, I'm not entirely sure whether it's. I know it often comes down to having to choose between work or family and delay childbirth. I tend towards delaying having a family just because I understand that those expectations will be there from all sides. I mean, I hope not. I hope that I'm not going to have to delay, say something like marriage or something like that. But because family does require such huge responsibilities from both men and women, I may lean towards choosing to delay having one just to be able to balance things out. I don't want to be a CEO. I mean, that's not my ambition. Probably end up owning my own company or something like that. Yeah.
Dr. Wrigley, I remember long back you gave me an example of you questioned the graduate students, how do they see themselves in 5 years or 10 years? Can you just share that with our listeners?
Yes. I had a class of seniors who were in a PR management class, and mostly women because most of the students in public relations are women. And I said, take out a sheet of paper and write down what you think you'll be doing in 5 and 10 years. And every woman in the class said, I will be married and having children and not working.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, wow. When I was in college as an undergrad, I hate to say it, it was about 30 years ago, every woman in the class would have said, I'll be working and building my career and all that. That was a real wake-up call to me. And I thought, wow, they're investing all this money in their education and in themselves and all this energy, and that's going to be their decision. I haven't quite figured out how that happened or what that means, but I was certainly surprised.
That conversation was very much similar to the conversation that we just had with the guests. So, do you really think that's how the future women want to be? Is it because they've seen their parents moving away from the family and they don't want that to happen to their family when they have their own children? So, do you think that's the reason?
The research shows that that's part of the reason, but I find it very interesting that women say, well, I can't have both. But men don't say, I can't have both. So we're back to the structure again. You know, why isn't anybody questioning that women need to say this? You know, men don't need to say this. So, again, you know, there are a lot of things that are in place that are status quo, invisible, hegemonic. That's the way things are set up. And if we don't question the very basic fundamental foundations of our culture, we're never going to change any of this in a really meaningful way. I just think everybody should have choices. That's my personal point of view. If somebody wants to have a family, great. If they want to be a CEO, great. They should have that choice.
You're listening to Women's Voices Radio on WAER Syracuse Jazz 88, and we are talking about glass ceiling. Daria, coming back to you, do you want to say something about why women really don't want to reach on the top positions? Is it that they feel even if they start their own company, do you think it's it because they'll have too many responsibilities, family and the company, and too many expectations from the people, from the family?
I don't feel as though women see that they don't have the choice to be able to achieve the highest levels of corporate America. If you look at the list of women who have achieved CEOs, it's because they have a support structure behind them, because their husband either doesn't work or they have nanny, they have other support structures at home to take care of the job so that they could be on call 24 hours a day. They could travel extensively. Men often have the support structure already in place, and I don't think it's an expectation. I believe for myself as a woman, I feel the natural desire to be at home with children and to take care of my family. Now, it is my conscious choice not to ascribe to the corporate structure and to try to climb the corporate ladder as much as possible and to want to be at home. So I don't believe that it's forced upon women to stay home or to have to choose between the two. I believe men also make that conscious decision whether or not they want to see their children playing softball or whether or not they want to be the top CEO of the company.
Christina, do you want to say?
Yes, I was thinking, well, from my point of view, I made the choice only by coming here and doing an MBA. I left the country where I was born and where I grew up. I started a career there, and still I wanted to build a career. I could have stayed home, have a family. My parents got married really young, and my mom would have liked me to actually stay home and, maybe have a family. But she knew that I really wanted to build a career. Coming to US and having an MBA and building a career, that was my dream. And she stayed behind me. So, I made a choice, and I really want to go further, as I've already started, so I don't want to give up. And usually when I start something, I want to take it all the way. So I hope I can, have a career. Still, I don't want to give up the personal life. I know it's hard, and I don't know, so far it has been only career, and everybody was, are you sure that's what you want? We'll see.
Dr. Wrigley, do you want to say something to this?
I think that the fact that we have a chance to talk about choices now is hopeful. I don't want to sound like a total pessimist here, but I've heard these kinds of conversations over the last several decades because I've just passed the mid-century mark myself, which sounds scary, but we've been talking about how things are going to get better, but people have been saying that for years. They're not going to get better unless structural changes happen. Otherwise, women are going to have to make choices. And I'm back to why should they have to? Why should that be different for women?
3 decades ago, there was this revolutionary changes in terms of women's rights. Do you think, despite the grave issue at present, there has been progress in the last couple of decades in terms of women's rights and moving up the ladder and other issues?
Well, we haven't even talked about pay equality.
Mm-hmm.
And don't get me started on that. An equal pay provision has been languishing in Congress forever.
Mm-hmm.
Women today, across all fields, no matter what the job, high level, low level, make about 65 to 68 cents to the dollar than men make. And I'm sorry, that's been happening for so long. You can't tell me that there isn't something structural that's causing that. I don't think it's evil men out there wanting to pay them less. I think there's a structure in place that is complicit with that.
So is it same across all the continents?
I can't speak for all other countries, but I know in the industrialized world that's true.
Chinelo, you want to add something?
I did have a question. What I was wondering is, you talk about changing the structure. What are some of the things that are being done to change the structure of things? How would you go about changing something that most people don't even think about on a daily basis?
Well, the first thing you do is you do programs like this. You create awareness. When I talk to undergraduate classes particularly, and I toss out these statistics about unequal pay, I've had students stand up in big lecture halls and argue with me. That can't possibly be true. People your age fixed that, didn't they? Back in the 60s. No, we didn't fix it because we weren't able to fix it. So I think there's a lack of awareness first.
Another question I have. If you were thinking about changing the structure, I mean, awareness is one thing, but if you have people denying that this is even happening, and if you have women, as you mentioned earlier, women who have sort of internalized the ideas and the structure, do you start? What do you do? Throw out the old generation and start afresh, or how do you go about changing women who have thought this way unconsciously for most of their lives?
Great question. If I had the answer to that, I probably could retire. I think we just have to question things more. If we question how we get a baby ready to take home from the hospital, even it starts right there. Certain colors are acceptable for boys. Certain colors are acceptable for girls. You get them home. Certain toys are acceptable. Boys are handled more roughly as babies than girls are. The research shows that we set them on separate paths right from the get-go. So if we teach people that we're doing that and say, hey, did you ever think about being more egalitarian in the types of activities you offered your children, the types of courses you urged them to take, and so forth, maybe that would make a difference. It would take a long time, but it might work.
But the question over here, the $1,000,000 question would be that how much longer, how many more years to go for this? So,
well, I think women and men have to get upset about this. But women are socialized not to make waves, to build consensus, to help people get along. And I've seen bumper stickers which say it better than I can. Well-behaved women rarely make history. Well-behaved women rarely are paid fairly. Well-behaved women rarely move up as far as they want to go. Until we misbehave and talk about it and get people to listen, I don't think anything's going to change. And I think that's really unfortunate.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think everybody agrees with this issue and hope it gets solved very soon and women reach the top positions. It was really wonderful discussion. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Wrigley, Christina, Daria, and Chinelo. Let's listen to our features, Health Notes by Antara Basu and Women in Sports by Gloria on Women's Voices Radio coming up after the break.
Hello and welcome to our new monthly feature titled Health Notes, in which I will be exploring different health issues on the first Thursday of every month. I will discuss new technologies, new drugs, and new cures available to help us lead healthy lives. I will also discuss alternative remedies and integrative approaches in medicine to manage many chronic conditions. All in all, my aim is to help you make some sense of the bewildering array of information available to us today. My focus today is on mental health, mainly clinical depression and its siblings, bipolar disorder and seasonal affective disorder, more commonly known by its acronym SAD. Nearly 10% of the US population, or 19 million people, suffer from clinical depression every year. Women are twice as likely as men to experience depression. 1 out of every 8 women will suffer from some form of clinical depression in her lifetime. Women also experience higher rates of SAD and dysthymia or chronic depression, where the symptoms are not disabling but keep one from functioning well or feeling good. Women also suffer from higher rates of the depressed phase of manic depression when they have bipolar disorder, and are 3 times more likely to experience rapid cycling bipolar disorder. Depression can be an extremely debilitating condition that can prevent one from being able to function on a day-to-day basis. Without treatment, depression can last for weeks, months, and even years. Major depression interferes with the ability to work, to study, to sleep, to eat, and to enjoy activities. There's a persistent feeling of sadness and hopelessness, accompanied by a loss of interest in daily activities. Other symptoms that are also very common are a loss of energy, fatigue, feeling unworthy, having problems concentrating, change in appetite leading to either weight loss or weight gain, irritability, and even thoughts of death and suicide in severe cases. Bipolar disorder, also sometimes called manic depressive illness, is characterized by cycling mood changes, manic high phases of hyperactivity followed by a depression of lows. The changes may be rapid, but often they are gradual. Seasonal affective disorder is depression triggered by a lack of sunlight during the fall and winter months. It is characteristically seasonal and is thought to be caused due to an increase in production of melatonin, which in turn leads to the extreme sensation of lethargy and sleepiness, so commonly associated with SAD. Clinical depression will not go away on its own and requires treatment. Mild depression can be treated with counseling or psychotherapy alone. Psychotherapy teaches how to cope with depression and change negative thinking patterns in individuals. Moderate to severe depression requires both antidepressants for immediate relief and counseling for long-term treatment. While antidepressants are sometimes prescribed for SAD as well, light therapy, also called phototherapy, has been found to be very effective. Patients are exposed to special bright lights 3 to 4 hours a day in their homes, which help combat depression. Along with psychotherapy and medication, there are numerous things we can do in our daily life to keep ourselves mentally healthy. Mental activities like reading the newspaper or doing the crossword puzzle help in keeping our brains healthy and happy. Exercise is important, not just for physical health but also for mental health, since exercise releases endorphins which help elevate mood. Exercise also increases blood circulation and helps in getting a good night's sleep. Certain supplements have also been shown to be essential for the proper functioning of the nervous system and the brain. The vitamin Bs, including folic acid, are very important, and especially for the elderly when the body's ability to absorb nutrients decreases. A diet rich in fresh fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and essential fatty acids found in fish, walnuts, and flaxseed oil are also important as they promote good mental health. One should avoid diet sodas and foods containing sugar substitute aspartame, since it has been found to block serotonin and can cause depression in individuals who are already serotonin deprived and also contribute to insomnia. It's important to recognize the signs and symptoms of depression and to get help. A healthy mind is essential for a healthy body. Please keep listening and join me again next month. This is Anthara Basu with your monthly Health Note.
Recently, a friend commented to me that women's sports wasn't very political, the implication being that listeners wouldn't be interested in my version of Sports Illustrated filled with the accomplishments and contributions of women athletes. So my 2 minutes this evening is devoted to sharing a little history so that we all can better appreciate what women have contributed, not just to the games we play, but to the role of women in the larger social dialogue. Today, more girls and women play sports than ever before in American history. It's important to note that even as non-athletes, women are finding more and more career opportunities in the $212 billion sports industry. But this story isn't just about the glory. Did you know that the Equal Pay Act was passed by President Kennedy in 1963? Yet 40 years later, America's working women and female athletes and coaches still earn significantly less than their male counterparts? An average Division I men's basketball coach earns $71,000. Average Division I women's basketball coach, $39,000. Did you know that Title IX, the 1972 landmark legislation prohibiting gender discrimination in schools and colleges, was dismantled in 1984 as a result of the Grover City v. Bell decision? Did you know that the Civil Rights Restoration Act of 1988, the law that restored Title IX, only became law after overriding Reagan's presidential veto? The courts are deciding whether women get to compete and how much they're worth. That's pretty political, in my opinion. Women's collegiate athletes receive only 30% of all college athletic scholarship money. Only 17% of college athletic recruiting budgets is spent on women's sports, and only 5% of televised sports news coverage is devoted to women's sports. We need to remember that for all that has been accomplished, women still lag behind men in athletic scholarships, professional opportunities, pay, facilities, and media coverage. So, consider it the mission of my little sports briefing to give women a little more airtime, so that maybe we'll cultivate more fans, which as we all know means more dollars, and more dollars equals greater opportunities, better facilities, and more media coverage. This is Gloria Craigle, and you're listening to Women's Voices Radio on WAER, Jazz 88 FM, Syracuse.
In memory of Coretta Scott King.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace has brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun.
You are listening to Women's Voices Radio. I'm Nivedita Suravaram. Before we move on, few announcements. The Community Folk Arts Center and Paul Robinson Performing Arts Company are relocating to 805 East Genesee Street across from Syracuse Stage. Join them this Saturday for a gala reopening reception beginning at 5:45 p.m. and featuring the retrospective photography exhibition of Mrs. Marjorie Wilkins, a recent guest on Women's Voices Radio. The Red House in Harmony Square hosts a film festival of 7 award-winning Asian short films, ranging from animation to documentary to short comedy and drama. Beginning next Friday evening, February 10th. Tune in next week for preview of this first annual Red House winter event. And that's our show tonight. I'm Nivi Suravaram, tonight's producer and host. Thanks to Nancy, who directed the show, and Tracy, who engineered tonight. The Women's Voices theme was written by Jackie Tara Washington, recorded by us with Mark Kapani on guitar. Please let us know how you like the show. Email us at radiowoman@aol.com. I repeat, radiowoman@aol.com. Women's Voices Radio is community-based collaborative project. The views that we and our guests express do not necessarily reflect the views of WAER. We are grateful to WAER for their continued and enthusiastic support of community-based radio by and about women. Next week, join us with host Nancy Keefe Rose for conversations with 2 authors celebrating new publications. That's next Thursday, 9th February at 8 p.m. All right here on Women's Voices Radio, WAER, Syracuse, Jazz 88. Good night.